Have you ever been sitting at work on a Friday night, scrolling through YouTube, and thought, what if I just went to Everest? Don't lie. That thought has crossed everyone's mind at least once. And right away, you pushed it away. It's expensive. It's dangerous. It's for crazy people. You're right on all three counts. But let's figure out just how right you are. In 2023, 18 people remained forever on Everest's slopes. Among them were experienced guides with 20 years on the job, and one corporate lawyer from Texas. He paid $85,000 for his first and last mountaineering trip. He didn't know how to use an ice axe. He hired a personal cook but forgot a second oxygen bottle. His story isn't unique. Every year, more ordinary people try to buy their way to the top of the world, and the number of bodies on the trail keeps growing too. Today, we'll break down 3 questions. First, how much does Everest really cost in dollars? Second, what are the stages of preparation for someone who's never been in the mountains? Third, why the answer to the first question doesn't matter at all if you're not willing to spend 3 years on the second. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Accessibility. Let's start with the numbers, because that's what everyone looks at first. Online, you can find offers from Nepalese agencies starting at $35,000. And that's real. Those offers exist. But, huge but, that price is only if you're willing to carry your own oxygen, sleep in a tent with strangers, forget about satellite phones, and sign a paper that says nobody will come get you, even if you break your spine. Seriously. On the flip side, Western operators, like Alpine Ascents, or RMI, are quoting $65,000 to $110,000 for what they call full service. So what do you get for that kind of money? A personal Sherpa guide, unlimited oxygen tanks, your own private tent, hot meals 3 times a day, satellite internet so you can post on Instagram from base camp, and helicopter insurance up to 21,000 feet. So the difference between 35,000 and 110,000? That's the difference between surviving and being comfortable. But here's the thing, neither option includes the real costs. The costs that start 2 years before you even buy a plane ticket to Kathmandu. Chapter 2. The Hidden Budget of Preparation. Okay, let's imagine someone. Let's call him Client. Just some guy. He's 35 years old. He works in an office. His physical activity is basically walking up 4 flights of stairs a couple times a week. He's never been in the mountains. Like, at all. He doesn't know what crampons are, or an ice axe, or acclimatization. And one day he decides, I want to climb Everest. From that moment his budget explodes. Because Everest isn't a vacation tour. It's the top of a mountaineer's career. Normal people spend decades working toward this. Over the next 2.5 years, our guy has to spend money on 4 categories he doesn't even know exist. Category 1, medical clearance. Before you even put on boots, you have to prove your heart, lungs, and brain can function at 29,000 feet, where there's almost no oxygen. A full checkup at a good clinic runs $1,500 to $2,000. What's in there? Stress test on your heart, lung function test, brain MRI. Yeah, they check for aneurysms, because those things can burst at altitude and kill you instantly. Plus blood work and a sports medicine consult. 80% of people fail at this stage. Just done. A tiny irregular heartbeat you never knew about? Mild asthma, slightly high brain pressure, at sea level no big deal, at altitude, you're dead in hours. Category 2, basic physical training. For the next 12 months, our guy has to train with a coach at least 4 times a week. What kind of training? Squats, lunges, leg presses, because coming down the mountain destroys your legs if you're not ready. Cardio, running, biking, elliptical, 6 hours a week, plus breathing exercises and training in a hypoxic chamber. That's a room that simulates high altitude. That stuff costs 100 to 200 bucks an hour. A good personal trainer for a year, $8,000 to $10,000. Hypoxic chamber sessions, another $3,000 to $4,000. And that's assuming you live in a big city that even has this equipment. Category 3. Psychological preparation. Nobody talks about this part. High altitude climbing absolutely wrecks your mind. You'll sleep 3 or 4 hours a night. You'll feel high from lack of oxygen, and then terrified the next second. You'll walk past frozen bodies of people who were right next to you a few hours ago. And you'll have to make life or death decisions while basically being drunk, because that's what hypoxia does to your brain. So experience guides recommend seeing a psychologist who specializes in extreme situations. You learn how not to panic, how to make decisions when your brain is starving for air. 50 hours of that, $3,000 to $5,000. Chapter 3. Gear. The battle for every gram. Category 4. The most painful one. Gear. Unlike normal camping where you can borrow stuff or buy cheap options, on an 8,000-meter mountain, cheap gear kills you. Let me walk you through what our guy has to buy. Boots. Special ones for Everest. Double or triple layers. They work at 70 below zero. Best models: La Sportiva Olympus, Mons. Scarpa Phantom 8000. $1,300 to $1,500 for a pair. Plus crampons, those metal spikes, another $200 to $300. Clothes. A full body suit for 8,000 meters. From Marmot, North Face, Mountain Hardwear. Runs $1,500 to $2,500. Then thermal underwear, $150 to $200. Down jacket, another $300 to $500. Total for just clothes, $3,000 to $4,000. Head and face. Helmet, $150 to $200. Glacier glasses, same. Balaclava, $50. Sunscreen and zinc paste for your nose and lips, another $50. Hands, 3 layers, thin wool gloves, thick fleece gloves, big down mitts. Total about $300. Sleeping gear. Sleeping bag rated for 40 below, $700 to $1,200. Sleeping pad with good insulation, $150 to $200. Stove for cooking at altitude, $200. Titanium pot, $100. The essentials. Ice axe, $150 to $200. Carabiners and rope, $100. Headlamp that works in the cold, $100 to $200. Extra batteries, $50. Medical kit with special altitude drugs, about $300. Oxygen system. If your tour operator doesn't include it, 4 or 5 tanks at $500 to $600 each, $2,500 to $3,000. Regulator, $500 to $700. Mask with valves, $200 to $300. Nose piece, $50. Okay, let's add it up. Gear without clothes, around $8,000 to $9,000. With clothes, $12,000 to $13,000. Plus random consumables, batteries, gas for the stove, repair kits, another $500 to $1,000. And here's the thing. You can't buy used gear. You can't rent old stuff. High altitude gear wears out after 2 or 3 seasons. And if your boots or gloves don't fit perfectly, frostbite. Simple as that. So yeah, those numbers are the minimum. Chapter 4. Where a total beginner actually starts. Okay, so far our office guy, who's never been above 2,000 meters, has spent about $20,000. Medical checks, personal trainer, psychologist, full set of gear. He's healthy. He's strong. He's got the gear. He's determined. And now, He makes the most common beginner mistake. He tries to jump straight to a 7,000-meter peak, or even an Everest commercial trip, with zero experience but money. That's a guaranteed way to die or lose your fingers on your first real mountain. Why? Because you can't learn acclimatization from a book or a video. Acclimatization is a physical process. Your body only learns by actually being at altitude, with real sleepless nights, real nausea, real panic attacks. And you need to learn that on a mountain where a mistake won't kill you. So what mountain is right for a first step? For an American who lives in the US and doesn't want to fly across an ocean, 3 good options. First, Mount Rainier in Washington State, 4,392 meters. Highest peak in the Cascades. An American mountaineering icon. Rainier is basically a training ground. Future Everest guides learn here. Commercial trips last 3 or 4 days. You learn crampons, ice axes, glacier travel. A guide from RMI costs $1,200 to $1,700 per person, plus gear rental and park fees. Total, $1,400 to $2,200. Second, Mount Whitney in California. 4,421 meters. Highest point in the lower 48. In summer, you can actually hike it without special ice gear. But permits are a lottery, hard to get. A guided trip runs $800 to $1,200. Third, Pico de Orizaba in Mexico. 5,636 meters. Third highest peak in North America. Technically easier than Rainier, no deep crevasses, but much higher. Tours run $900 to $1,400, plus a flight from the US. Which one should our guy pick? If you live on the West Coast or can fly to Seattle, start with Rainier. Because Rainier is the closest you'll get to Everest conditions on a glacier. You'll learn not to fall, not to slide without self-arrest, not to panic when your guide yells at you. Here's the thing though. After Rainier, a lot of people realize mountains aren't for them. They're scared of heights. They hate the cold. They're exhausted for days. That's totally fine. Better to figure that out on a $1,500 mountain than an $80,000 one. Chapter 5. The Second Mountain. From 4,000 to 6,000 meters. Denali or Aconcagua. After the first mountain, whether it was Mount Rainier, Mount Whitney, or Pico de Orizaba, our client is in a weird in-between state. He's already felt what altitude sickness is like. He knows about blisters, ace fatigue, and a tent that feels like it's about to blow away. But he still hasn't been above about 18,000 feet, maybe 19 if he did Orizaba. And for Everest, he'll need to spend multiple nights above 23,000 feet. Yeah, the gap is huge. So the next step has to be higher and harder. His body needs to start getting used to long-term, low oxygen. For an American climber who wants to do Everest someday, there are 2 classic second mountains. Number 1, Denali in Alaska. 6,190 meters. That's 20,310 feet. The highest peak in North America. Number 2, Aconcagua in Argentina. 6,961 meters. 22,837 feet. The highest peak in the Andes and the entire southern hemisphere. Both of these mountains are way harder than any first mountain, and both will cost serious money and time. Let's go through them one by one. Denali, the Alaska survival test. Denali isn't just high, it's cold, really cold. At the summit in June, which is actually the best season, the average temperature is 30 below 0 Fahrenheit. With wind, feels like 55 below. That's colder than Everest at the same time of year. And here's the thing, On Denali, there's no full service like on Everest. You carry your own backpack. You pull a sled with your gear up to 14,000 feet. You set up your own camps on the glacier. And you wait for good weather, sometimes for days. This is actually perfect training for Everest, because Denali teaches you patience. It teaches you to rely on yourself. And it teaches you how to use your gear when one small mistake means losing fingers. The standard route is called the West Buttress. The whole expedition takes 14 to 21 days. Here's what a typical schedule looks like. Fly to Anchorage, drive to a little town called Talkeetna, then take a small plane onto the Kahiltana Glacier. That's your base camp at 6,900 feet. Then you start moving up with your gear. Camp 1 at 7,800 feet. Camp 2 at 11,000. Camp 3 at 14,000. And finally the high camp at 17,000 feet. Then, summit day. The hardest part isn't even the climbing. It's the acclimatization. On Denali, they use a system called walk high, sleep low. You go up to a higher point, drop off gear, or just do a practice hike, then come back down to sleep at a lower camp. You do this over and over before you even try for the summit. So how much does this cost? A licensed guide from companies like Alpine Ascents, RMI, or Mountain Trip will charge you $7,500 to $10,000 for a 14-day trip. That's per person, in a group of 4 or 5 climbers. What does that include? 1 or 2 guides, usually a ratio of 1 guide for every 3 or 4 clients. All your food on the mountain, group gear like tents, stoves, ropes and sleds. Your permit for Denali National Park, that's about $400 by itself. And ground transfers in Alaska. What's not included? Your flight to Anchorage from the lower 48, anywhere from $500 to $1,000 depending on the season. A hotel in Anchorage before and after, another $200 to $300. Tips for your guides. In the US, 10 to 15% is standard, so that's another $800 to $1,500. And if you need to rent any personal gear like high-altitude boots, that's another $250 to $400. So altogether, for about 2.5 weeks on a glacier in Alaska, our client is looking at $9,000 to $12,500. Why would an American pay that? Because Denali is the only really big mountain where you can practice expedition-style climbing without leaving the country. You'll pull heavy sleds, you'll cook dinner at 14,000 feet in a snowstorm, you'll wait out bad weather for 6 days in a tiny tent. And all of that happens inside a US national park. After Denali, Everest doesn't seem so impossible anymore, at least when it comes to cold and wind. Aconcagua, height and slow acclimatization. If Denali is about cold, Aconcagua is about height. Almost 23,000 feet, that's seriously high. It's warmer than Denali. Summit in January is maybe 20 below instead of 30 to 35 below, but the risk of pulmonary or cerebral edema is actually higher, just because of the altitude. The logistics are totally different too. On Aconcagua, you don't have to haul your own gear on a sled. You can hire local porters, they're called porteros, for $100 to $150 a day to carry your heavy stuff from base camp up to Camp Berlin at about 19,000 feet. You walk light. This actually feels a lot like commercial Everest, where Sherpas do all the heavy lifting, and you just focus on breathing and putting one foot in front of the other. The standard route is called the normal route. There's also a harder Polish route, but beginners should stay away from that. The whole program takes 16 to 22 days. Here's how it goes. Fly to Mendoza, Argentina. That's a city at the foot of the Andes. Get your permit. That's about $800 by itself. Then take a jeep to the national park entrance and start hiking to base camp, called Plaza de Mulas, at about 13,800 feet. From there, you do a series of acclimatization hikes to higher camps. Camp Canada, at 16,400 feet. Camp Nido de Condores, at 17,700. Camp Berlin, at 19,300. And then finally, the summit push from Berlin. The big difference from Denali is that you have way more time to acclimate, because you're not wasting energy hauling heavy loads. But that actually tricks a lot of people. They think, the porters are carrying my stuff, I'm walking light, so I can just zoom up to the top. And then at 22,000 feet, their lungs fill with fluid, because moving too fast without proper rotations is dangerous. So how much for Aconcagua? A commercial tour with an English-speaking guide and porter support runs $4,000 to $7,000. That usually includes your permit, $800, all transfers from Mendoza, food on the mountain, your guide, 2 or 3 porters per group, and tent camping. What's not included? Your flight from the US to Mendoza, usually through Buenos Aires, so $1,200 to $2,000 depending on the season. Insurance that covers you up to 23,000 feet, about $600. Tips for your guide and porters. In Argentina, 15% is standard, so another $600 to $1,000. And gear rental if you need it. Boots, down jacket, about $400. Total for 3 weeks in the Andes, $6,500 to $9,500. So why pick Aconcagua over Denali? Because it gives you real experience at almost 23,000 feet. If you can do Aconcagua without major problems, your body has proven it can sleep at 19,000 and climb to 23,000. That's basically a green light for 8,000-meter peaks. The downsides? Logistics are more complicated. International flights, language barrier, and comms aren't always great. That's why some American climbers choose Denali first, because it's home, and save Aconcagua for later, specifically as training for Everest's altitude. Which one should our client pick? Honestly, there's no universal answer. If you want to save money and time and get really tough and extreme cold, pick Denali. $9,000 to $12,000, 2.5 weeks. You'll come out way stronger. If your goal is to test yourself at altitudes close to 8,000 meters, and you're okay spending extra on international flights, pick Aconcagua. It's more expensive and longer, but after it, no Everest operator will ever ask, why haven't you been above 20,000 feet? The ideal scenario? Do both. Denali and Aconcagua, in either order, but that's only if your budget and schedule allow it. For most people, one of these is realistic. Either way, after this second mountain, our client is officially not a beginner anymore. Here's what he has now. 2 climbs with nights above 13,000 feet. That was his first mountain. And 1 climb with nights above 19,000 feet. That's his second. If he did Denali, he has experience roped up on a glacier. If he did Aconcagua, he has experience working with porters at high altitude. He understands how his body reacts to low oxygen. Does his pulmonary artery tighten up? How fast does his oxygen saturation drop? Does supplemental oxygen even help him at 20,000 feet? That he probably tested that on Denali. Since on Aconcagua people almost never use oxygen. And most importantly, he's spent about $12,000 to $15,000 or $10,000 below these 2 stages of preparation. Well, what is he? Plus, about 2 months of actual time in the mountains. That's still way cheaper than making 1 single mistake on Everest. Chapter 6. The third step. First 8,000-meter peak. Cho Oyu. After the second mountain, Denali or Aconcagua, our client is at a crossroads. He's been to 20,000 or even 23,000 feet. His body is starting to adapt to low oxygen. His mind can handle cold and exhaustion. But jumping from 23,000 feet straight to Everest at 29,000? That's not a challenge, that's a death wish. His body needs to spend at least one night above 26,000 feet, in what climbers call the death zone. That's where, even with bottled oxygen, your cells start dying. So the third step is Cho Oyu, 8,201 meters. That's about 26,900 feet. It sits on the border of Nepal and Tibet, just 12 miles west of Everest. Why Cho Oyu and not some other 8,000-meter peak? Because it's the safest option for a beginner. The route is gentle, never steeper than about 35 degrees. No vertical ice walls, no deep crevasses. The weather window lasts 10 to 15 days. On Everest you get maybe 3 to 5 days. Base camp is at 5,700 meters. That's about 18,700 feet, which is actually 350 meters higher than Everest Base Camp. That higher start helps you acclimatize faster. The downside? The mountain is in Tibet, so you need Chinese permits. But any reputable operator handles that for you. So how much does Cho Oyu cost? A commercial tour in 2024 or 2025 will run you $15,000 to $22,000. Let me break that down. The permit and Chinese government fees alone are $8,000 to $9,000. That's just the price of being allowed on the mountain. Sherpa and guide services, $6,000 to $8,000. That gets you a lead Sherpa guide with a UIAGM certification. That's the International Mountain Guide License, plus 1 or 2 assistants. The standard ratio is 1 guide for every 2 clients, plus an assistant for the whole group. Oxygen, $4,000 to $5,000. On your first 8,000-meter peak, do not try to go without oxygen. Just don't. That's for elite climbers with years of experience. You'll need 3 or 4 tanks at $500 to $600 each, plus a mask, regulator, and nose piece, another $500 or so. Some operators include oxygen in the base price, so check your contract. Food, lodging, and ground transfers, $2,000 to $3,000. That covers your flight from Kathmandu to Lhasa, a jeep ride to base camp, that's 2 days of driving, 3 hot meals a day in camp, a tent, it'll be a 2-person tent unless you pay extra for a single, and satellite internet. By the way, that internet is $300 for 5 gigabytes. Yeah. What's not included? Your international flight from the US to Kathmandu or Beijing, $1,200 to $2,500. Insurance that covers you up to 27,000 feet, $800 to $1,500. Tips for your Sherpas, $250 to $500 per person. Visas and miscellaneous stuff, another $500 to $1,000. So let's add it up. A basic tour at $18,000, plus flight $2,000, plus insurance $1,200, plus tips $400, plus MISC $800. That's about $22,400. If you're on a tight budget, you might get down to $18,000 or $19,000. If you want the premium experience, $28,000 to $30,000. And how long does it take? 25 to 35 days. Here's what those days look like. Chapter 7. Choosing an Everest operator. The cost of full service. After successfully climbing Cho Oyu, our client is finally ready for the final stage, buying a commercial Everest trip. But here's the thing, you can't just pay and show up. You need to pick the right operator, pick your dates, decide on your oxygen strategy, and sign papers that in normal life would be considered completely insane. Prices for commercial Everest tours from the south side, that's Nepal, in 2025, range from $35,000 to $120,000. What makes the difference? 3 things. The operator's reputation, how many Sherpas per client, and the quality of your oxygen. Let's break it down. Budget segment, $35,000 to $50,000. These are small Nepalese companies, often one guide for every 4 or 5 clients. Minimal oxygen, 2 or 3 tanks. Masks and regulators are last year's models. Permits might get delayed. Here's my honest advice. Our client has already spent over $50,000 on preparation. He should not, I repeat, should not, be looking at this option. Saving $15,000 on an operator is saving money on your own life. Don't do it. Mid-range segment, $55,000 to $75,000. Western and Nepalese companies with solid reputations. Names like Seven Summits Treks or Adventure Consultants. What's included? The permit, that's $11,000 right there, which the operator pays to the Nepali government. One personal Sherpa guide for every 2 clients. 4 or 5 oxygen tanks. Food at base camp. Transfers from Kathmandu. This is the minimum acceptable level for our client. Premium segment, $80,000 to $120,000. Operators like Alpine Ascents, RMI, or Madison Mountaineering. Now we're talking. Personal Sherpa guide just for you, 1-to-1. 6 or 7 oxygen tanks, lab tested to make sure they're actually full. Your own private tent at base camp. Satellite communication. Helicopter insurance up to 6,400 meters, that's about 21,000 feet. A cook who prepares your personal meals. For a client who's climbing Everest for the first, and probably last time, this is the safest option by far. But even with a premium package, let's say $85,000, there are still extra costs that fall on our client's shoulders. International flight. International flight. A ticket from the US to Kathmandu in economy class runs $1,200 to $2,500 depending on the season. Insurance. Regular travel insurance doesn't cover you above 20,000 feet. You need a specialized policy from Global Rescue or SOS International. For 60 days, that's the whole season, it's $1,500 to $2,500. It has to include helicopter evacuation and body repatriation. Without this insurance, no serious operator will take you. Tips. In Nepal, tipping your Sherpas, guides and cooks is not optional. It's an obligation. Standard practice is 10 to 15% of the tour cost. If you paid $85,000, you need to set aside another $8,500 to almost $13,000 in cash to hand out at the end of the expedition. And trust me, the Sherpas remember who tipped what. Gear you don't have yet. Even though our client already bought almost everything for the previous mountains, Everest might need extras. Maybe his old suit wore out on Cho'oyu. Maybe he needs spare batteries for his satellite phone. Add another $1,000 to $2,000 for surprises. So, let's add it up for a premium tour at $85,000. Tour, $85,000. Tips, 15%, $12,750. Insurance, $2,000. Flight, $2,000. I hotel in Kathmandu before and after, 10 days, 3 stars, $1,000. Spare gear and unexpected stuff, $2,000. Total for the tour and related expenses, about $105,000. Now add the $75,500 he already spent on preparation, medical, training, gear, Rainier, Denali, or Aconcagua, Cho'oyu. Grand total, $180,250. That's the full cost of turning an office worker into someone who has the right to stand on the summit of Everest. For comparison, the median home price in the US in 2025 is about $420,000. Everest costs half a house. The question isn't whether you have this money. The question is whether you're willing to spend it, knowing that even with perfect preparation, your chance of not coming home is 1.5% to 2%. When do you book? The climbing season on the south side is May. Operators start taking bookings 9 to 12 months in advance. For spring 2026, you need to book by August 2025 at the latest. The deposit is usually 20 to 30% of the tour cost, about $15,000 to $25,000. The rest is due 90 days before you fly out. What do you need to book? A medical certificate, the same tests from the beginning of preparation, plus a new exercise oxygen test. Certificates showing you climbed Cho'ou, or another 8,000-meter peak, and Aconcagua or Denali. A copy of your insurance. And a waiver that releases the operator from any claims if you die or become disabled. That last document is the one our client signs before getting on the plane. In black and white it says, "I understand that climbing Everest is life-threatening, and neither the company, nor the Sherpas, nor the Nepali government are responsible if I die." Signing that paper is the moment when preparation ends and reality begins. Chapter 8. The Everest Timeline. After 3 years of preparation and $180,000, our client is finally in Nepal. The whole process, from landing in Kathmandu to coming back home, takes about 60 days. Here's how it breaks down. Days 1 through 10. Approach. Fly from Kathmandu to Lukla, that's at 9,300 feet, on a tiny plane. The runway is famously short and famously scary. Then, a week of trekking. This is acclimatization by walking. Your body gets used to higher altitudes slowly, without the strain of climbing. Days 11 through 40. Rotations. Our client does not go straight for the summit. That would kill him. Instead, he makes 4 trips up the mountain and back down to base camp. Each time he goes a little higher. Each time his body adapts a little more. Days 41 through 50. Waiting for weather. This is the hardest part psychologically. The guide is waiting for the perfect window. 3 to 5 days in May, when the wind on the summit finally drops. Our client sits in his tent, checks his gear for the 100th time, fights off anxiety. Climbers have lost their minds during this wait. Days 51 through 55, the final summit push. Move from base camp to Camp 2, then to Camp 3, then to Camp 4 at about 26,000 feet. That evening, usually around 9 or 10 p.m., he starts climbing. 8 hours of climbing in the dark, at 35 below, on bottled oxygen. At sunrise, the summit, 29,032 feet. He gets maybe 15 to 20 minutes for photos, then immediate descent. No hanging around. Days 56 through 60, return. Descent back to base camp. 2 more days of trekking back to Lukla, a flight to Kathmandu, hot shower, real bed. Medical check to make sure he still has all his fingers and toes. 60 days, 29,000 feet up, $180,000 spent, and one person who will never be the same. Chapter 9. The full cost of climbing Everest for someone with no experience. We just walked the entire path, from absolute zero to the top of the world. 3 years of preparation. 6 mountains. Tens of thousands of dollars. So here's the answer to the question you've been waiting for since the beginning. For $180,000, our client got 3 years of his life dedicated to a single goal. 6 successful climbs. Rainier, Denali or Aconcagua, Cho'ou, and finally Everest. 2 frostbitten toes. The feeling will come back in about 6 months. 15 kilograms of weight loss. That's 33 pounds. 3 photographs on the summit of the world. And a story he will tell for the rest of his life. What didn't he get? A guarantee that he would come home. Even with perfect preparation, the best guides, the best gear, the best weather, The risk of death on Everest is 1 to 2%. 1 in 50 people doesn't come back. Let me put $180,000 in perspective for you. That's half the median price of a house in America. That's 3 years at a state university. Just tuition, not even room and board. That's a brand new Porsche 718 Cayman. That's 600 dinners for two at a nice restaurant, $300 each. That's 10 two-week vacations in the Maldives. The question is not whether you have this money. The question is whether you're willing to trade for it 3 years of your life, your comfort, your toes, and possibly your life itself. So here's my honest advice. If you've never been in the mountains, and you don't have $180,000 and 3 years of free time, forget about Everest. Seriously. Go climb Rainier. Go hiking in the national parks of Utah. Look at the mountains from below. It's free, and it's safe. If you do have the money and time, but no experience, start small. Rainier, then Denali or Aconcagua, then Cho Oyu. After Cho Oyu, you will know, not think, but know, whether Everest is actually for you. But whatever you do, don't be the person who shows up with zero experience and a checkbook. Because that person, the corporate lawyer from Texas who paid $85,000 for his first and last mountaineering trip, who didn't know how to use an ice axe, who hired a personal cook but forgot a second oxygen tank, that person is still up there. Thanks for watching.